Greetings from Budapest. Lot, or The Grass is Greener in Sodom by János Térei. The story of this piece began when I approached János, who was a good friend of mine, and I proposed the idea of whether the story of Lot would interest us. I only knew the story insofar as it had been taught in Bible class, that the wife was too curious, looked back, and was transformed into a pillar of salt. What happened afterwards, in fact, only later occurred to me. The tale of incest, how Lot sleeps with his daughters, also belonged to this story, as well as how and why he parted ways with Abraham. The real question remained: why would this topic be of interest in today's Hungary? János and I began discussing it, and then we started to work on it. Unfortunately, we could not finish because he died after writing the first version, which we would have continued collaborating on. So we were left with this raw material, which we endeavored to craft into a performance together with the dramaturg and the actors. Going back to what originally interested us, there is a man who is extremely religious, but at the same time he runs a huge business. He is very rich, he is a member of the elite, he is influential, he is involved in politics, but he also tries to stay out of it. He lives in a place where he is an immigrant, not a native. Sodom is a notoriously disreputable, immoral city, but he tries to remain moral. When he is eventually visited by the angels who save him, he measures his success in terms of business. Is it his wealth, saving money, that actually drives him, or his faith? Also, how does the fate of his family hinge upon what he has built up, what he has relied upon, or seemingly believed in? Parents say that they do everything for their children. How does that contribute to the family's breakdown? How does his wife turn against him? How do his daughters turn against him? And how does it all turn into a tragedy in which he himself is transformed? How do schizophrenia and the desire to conform tear him apart, destroy him, and crush him both morally and humanly? It is an interesting and relevant story for today's world. Here in Hungary, we are currently living under a political system where the rich Christian elite grows richer by the day. Lot raises the question: God, country, family, what is most important? And can all these things be reconciled? János Térei's answer is a bitter one. For a long time, he struggled with the question of whom he wanted to please, for whom he wanted to write. He wished to be a bridge between the opposite political parties through his writings. Daily, he pondered if this were even possible, or whether merely attempting it was to undermine oneself. This resulted in a rather skeptical and sad text. The actors in the performance have managed to preserve this unanswerable, decadent, and question mark-ridden text. What I wish to express is that, although the author left question marks at the end of statements, It in no way indicates that he failed to shape the work into a definite form. It is because resolving these questions, making definite statements, is probably impossible. That, at least, is how we felt.
You are to see János Térei's play entitled Lot, or the Grass is Greener in Sodom. János Térei was a very special figure in contemporary Hungarian literature and drama. He died very young in 2019, at the age of 48. Lot was the last play he wrote for Balázs Kovalik and the Örkény Theatre. Térei started out as a poet, but he has also written essays, short stories, prose, novels, and a considerable body of dramatic work. Throughout his artistic career, he was attracted to monumental forms, mythological themes, and biblical stories. Examples of this include Paulus, his novel in verse, and his Nibelung tetralogy, which draws heavily on mythology. His piece Lot follows this trend by taking the well-known biblical story and placing it in a contemporary medium. The piece can be described as both complete and incomplete. Complete because he finished its composition, and incomplete because he could not put his finishing touches on the text. The work we undertook with Balázs Kovalik and Ádám Nádasdy was actually editorial work. We stretched and adapted the material for the stage. Rather, we adapted it for the performance, but this was no radical change from the original, so it was actually a technical process. The text is written in free verse. Its language is both poetic and mundane, filtering the biblical story through this mixed idiom. We endeavored to preserve this in the performance. Its theme is also twofold. It is both a great story and a reflection on contemporary society. Due to the Örkény Theatre's history of presenting texts, both contemporary and classical, that raise questions about current Hungarian society, we have paid great attention to such pieces for nearly the past 20 years. This play continues that tradition.
As a founding member of UTE, I thank Forest Festival for inviting us to represent Hungarian drama with the Örkény István Theatre. It is also an important moment as it coincides with the 100th anniversary of Giorgio Strehler's birth. The greatest figure in European theatre. He led the Piccolo Teatro di Milano for 50 years and was director of the Odeon Theatre in Paris for the next 10 years. In 1990, he founded UTE with the aim of bringing together the most progressive achievements in European theatrical endeavors, and Thessaloniki was one of the first theaters to become a member of UTE. What characterized his productions were their grand scope and attention to detail, as well as a sense of discovering talent and modern-day critical thinking. Perhaps this latter quality represents a link with the art of János Térei. In all his writings, translations and public declarations, this modern critical approach is evident. If they had lived at the same time as Strehler, they would certainly have had something in common. I have had the privilege of working on some of János Térei's important pieces as a set designer over the last 20 years. Boris Godunov here at the Örkény Theatre, Jeremiah at the National Theatre, and Lót. Térei was a visionary. The premiere took place on 23rd of December 2019, just as the first news of COVID from China was breaking. We are in Sodom, a city of unprecedented prosperity, where the arbitrariness of a hedonistic lifestyle is rampant. It is in this city that startup entrepreneur Lót and his family operate, proudly prospering, making lamb out of gold and gold out of lamb. A mystical symbol of innocence becomes a commodity and a consumer product. Divine judgment strikes and destroys Sodom. Only Lót and his family escape. We performed it a few times after the premiere, and then everything in Europe closed because of the pandemic. The world today has suddenly become Sodom. We could not do the show for a good year. In terms of Lót's space, I will mention some aspects. Balázs Kovalik and I thought to incorporate the theme of small business capitalists as an important element of the spectacle. Mountains made of gold-colored tin cans form spaces, and a series of varied spatial forms gives way to the final destruction and collapse. Enjoy the performance.